This is Steve Colano, and this is Confidential Remarks. For most of the last century, market dominance was determined by physical mass. The largest companies prevailed because they had the most capital, the biggest workforces, and the most extensive physical infrastructure. These assets served as defensive moats. The enormous cost of replicating a global factory network or a national distribution chain created a barrier to entry that smaller competitors simply couldn't overcome. This era of stability depended on a predictable, linear world. But we have entered an environment of exponential data and machine speed automation. When the environment accelerates, the very walls that once provided security become a source of drag. Those massive fixed assets and rigid hierarchies restrict movement and obscure the organization's vision. Organizational mass has shifted from being a defensive mechanism to becoming a source of systemic friction. In a high-velocity market, the heaviest players are often the most vulnerable. Survival in this new landscape depends on the internal clock speed of the enterprise. We measure this through decision velocity. This is a measure of how effectively an organization can sense a shift in the market, interpret those incoming signals, and execute an adapted response. Traditional firms operate on mechanical rhythms, synchronized around quarterly reviews and annual budgets. In contrast, AI-native networks function through continuous real-time experimentation. These AI-native companies are dangerous because they cycle faster. They sense and adapt nonstop, operating inside the decision loops of larger competitors. Processing speed has replaced resource accumulation as the primary competitive advantage. The organization that learns the fastest ultimately dictates the terms of the market. To understand the shift in the corporate landscape, we can map the traditional industrial model against the emerging AI native model across 4 critical categories. Historically, capital was deployed in massive, multi-year cycles. This allowed companies to place enormous bets on specific stable outcomes. However, committing vast resources to a multi-year plan is a liability when the market landscape changes monthly. It locks the organization into a path that may no longer be viable. The modern alternative is real-time resource liquidity. In this model, capital is deployed in small, iterative bursts that can be redirected as new data arrives. The same inversion applies to infrastructure. Owning the physical means of production once ensured a monopoly. Today, competitive advantage comes from rapid signal interpretation. The value is found in the ability to process raw market data and identify a specific opportunity before the competition. Fixed infrastructure can blind a company. When an organization is invested in a specific physical asset, it often ignores market signals that suggest that asset is becoming obsolete. The third category is distribution. The industrial model relied on static monopolized networks to reach the customer. That physical control is being superseded by decision loop dominance. When an AI native organization identifies a consumer need and executes a digital solution in a matter of days, the incumbent's rigid linear supply chain becomes a secondary concern. Finally, we measure capability. The legacy metric for strength was linear headcount, the idea that more people equaled more output. In the new model, we optimize for cognitive velocity. This focuses on the speed of thought and the efficiency of automated execution. Increasing cognitive velocity allows for massive scale without adding the management friction associated with large human hierarchies. Across every category, the metrics that once defined a blue-chip corporation are now the leading indicators of organizational latency. AI native workflows represent an asteroid impact on the traditional business ecosystem. It is an environmental shock that favors the small and the fast. Rigid top-down hierarchies are brittle. They shatter when the environment shifts. Decentralized networks, however, are architecturally capable of absorbing these shocks and adapting. The core problem is that legacy organizations are running an internal operating system designed specifically for stability and slow, incremental change. We call this industrial cadence. It is the reliance on synchronized, slow-moving rhythms like quarterly planning and annual budget cycles. Attempting to operate with an industrial cadence in a machine speed environment creates a lethal mismatch between the company's internal perception and the reality of the market. This gap was evident in a recent case involving a global Fortune 100 company. The enterprise identified an AI-native workflow improvement that would significantly automate core operations and add massive value. Company leadership agreed the change was essential. Yet despite the urgency, the organizational structure dictated that the first meeting to plan execution would occur 6 months later. This graph illustrates the failure. While the market velocity is accelerating away on an exponential curve, the corporate timeline remains static, pushing action months into the future. The shaded area is the lethal gap. It represents the period where the organization is reacting to a world that no longer exists. One major cause of this paralysis is the reliance on quarterly planning. This creates a dangerous hallucination of control. Leadership manages based on a snapshot of data that is 3 months old, effectively steering the company based on a ghost of the market. Another bottleneck is the annual budgeting process. Capital rigidity starves new opportunities. Resources are often trapped in legacy projects that were funded a year ago, leaving the company unable to pivot when an AI-driven opportunity arises in real time. Finally, layered approvals across middle management ensure that even the most urgent market signals are stripped of their context and speed. This information decoupling means that by the time an action is finally authorized, the market has already moved on. The opportunity is dead. Most executives respond to this by trying to run the existing system faster. But pushing a rigid industrial-era process beyond its design limits only leads to organizational breakdown. The solution is an architectural rebuild focused on learning velocity. This requires dissolving the vertical hierarchy and replacing it with a decentralized matrix of interconnected nodes. This structure enables lateral feedback loops. Nodes can communicate and execute without the need to route every signal through a central apex for approval. In this model, intelligence is distributed. The tools for data analysis and AI-driven decision-making are placed directly at the edges of the organization. Autonomous execution allows the teams closest to the market to act on signals the moment they appear. Architecting for learning velocity is the only way for a modern organization to maintain continuous homeostasis with a hyper-accelerated market. The winners of the next decade will not be those with the most resources or the most prestigious history. While the massive dinosaurs of the industrial age struggle with the asteroid impact, a new generation of AI-native mammals thrives in the wreckage. Strategic survival now belongs exclusively to the organization that is structurally capable of processing reality faster than its competitors. This has been Confidential Remarks.